use their money. So that's grants. We're going to talk about sponsorships. Now, and there's a couple different kinds of sponsorships. You can have a company sponsor an event that you're doing, which is very common. You can also have, you could have a company sponsor your overall project. And so that's what I mean by sponsorship. Event sponsorships we'll talk about under events. And when we get to events, we're going to talk about a couple different kinds of events. You guys already do, like, what do you do, a bowl-a-thon?
Bowling.
Fundraiser, yeah.
That's our one fixture right now. In the past, that's kind of our spring fundraiser.
Yep.
In the past, we used to have like a 5K, 10K that we did. And that was our fall fundraiser. That ended up, the situation, the venue that we used and the people that we went to kind of dissolved and changed management. And
okay.
We didn't see that as something we could really continue to do sustainably. So
So
right now we've got the bowling fundraiser. Last fall we did a black tie gala.
Oh, you've done a black tie event?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd call it a casual black tie.
Yeah.
It was a beer tasting event at the GM Heritage Center.
Like gray tie.
Great.
And tickets were
Heritage
$75.
Center. We did an event at the GM Heritage Center during our capital campaign, and Governor Granholm came and everything. It was.
Well, that's what we were missing.
It was a great. It was an excellent
It's
event.
a great venue.
I've been through lots of events, so we can talk about that. And I'd love to hear more about your event. Not necessarily tonight, although you can bring it up.
I've already been talking to some venues, so yeah,
okay.
Feedback would be good.
So we're going to talk about the small events, but I'm also going to talk about the big gala event. Okay, small events raise less money, but you could be planning 3 or 4 of them at a time, and they have a short runway, except for the fact that you need to get word out about them. You need people to come, right? But you're usually not trying to get hundreds of people to come to those events. You want to try to get maybe 50 people to come to a bowl-a-thon or something. So we're going to talk about those different kinds. And then individual giving, which is, two types of individual giving. One is doing an appeal where you bring together lists of names and addresses or email addresses, and you send out an appeal piece to them in the mail or online and ask people to give. And again, you use your case for support to create a compelling piece that will get a higher response. Or the other type of individual giving is the one-on-one ask, where you're actually you're identifying people that you think in your circle that would support this kind of project, and you're bringing them along. And that's the scariest for most people, but you're going to get bigger gifts that way than you are through the mass appeal, as you likely already know. Okay? So any questions about these 4 things that we're going to talk about? Because I'm going to put up a slide on each one of them.
Okay.
And we're going to spend a few minutes talking about each one.
I'm a little curious as to the difference between a grant and a sponsorship.
Okay.
But if you want to hold off and address that as we come to them.
When I'm doing those 2 first, so when we talk about sponsorship, if I haven't clarified things for you, ask the question. Okay. All right. So let's talk about grants. Now, on each of these vehicles, I have this little chart at the bottom, because as I was walking the dog one night and thinking about this presentation, I'm like, I need a way to kind of compare the differences between these vehicles I'm talking to you about. And I thought, well, the obvious one is how much money you can raise through each one. Is it more money or less money? But then what's also important to you guys is the amount of time and effort it's going to take relative to the others, and any cost associated with doing it. So there's no science here, you don't see any numbers, I'm just weighing them against each other relatively, okay? So let me talk about this, and then for each one I'll talk about, I'll kind of talk about these bars as I describe each one. So grants, I already told you, there's federal and state grants, there's foundation grants. Let's X this out for right now, okay? These take a long time to get. They usually have a horrendous application process, and the reporting can be onerous. Reporting back, it can be reporting back on a monthly basis, and sometimes, a lot of times they're reimbursement grants, which means they send you the money after you've spent it. And I just want to X this out for you guys. If we were talking about a longer term process or a longer term project, we might do this. But I think it's viable for you guys to consider looking at corporate and private foundations. And there's a way to research them. And I put it at the bottom here. This foundationcenter.org has a database of pretty much every foundation in the country. They don't have all of the corporate ones in there, but they have a lot of the corporate ones in there. You pay to access it, but, and it's expensive. I don't want you to pay to access it because you can get access to it through some public libraries. I think Wayne State would let you access it. And if all else fails, I just found out that I have access to it, and I've used it. It's a great way to do research, because what you do is, if you know about, if somebody tells you, hey, the Kresge Foundation in Troy does this kind of, funds this kind of project, you can plug in the foundation name and find out all the information. It tells you who's on their board, it tells you what grants they've given out recently, it tells you how much they fund, and it tells you what their funding priorities are. It tells you when their deadline is, or deadlines. It tells you when you need to apply, when you'll hear, how they make the decision. It gives you all this information that's standardized.
What's Foundation
What's that?
Center, what's that website?
Foundationcenter.org, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's how you get to it. And beyond that, if you don't know a foundation, but you want to try to find foundations that would fund this, then you could start doing keyword searches. Well, I want to try to find a foundation that funds international projects for public health. You could put in, drinking water, different things. And I've just played around doing searches on different keywords before and finding out. And then you look at their profile. Oh, this one looks like a hot one. Let's print this out and consider applying to this one. Or you can then go to their website. It even gives you their website, so you can look specifically at what do they want to see. So it's a great way to do research. And so the funding is for a period, usually for a period of 1 year or less. You're going to fill out this, usually it's a fairly involved application process, and they will tell you, almost always they will tell you, your application needs to look like this. It needs to have these sections in it. Boom, boom, boom. Description of your project, budget, who's involved, how you're going to do it, timeline, what's the organization information. You're going to fill all that out. And it can be a 3-page application, it can be a 10-page. It depends on what they want to see. Every once in a while, you'll come up with somebody who says, "Just send us your proposal," and then you've got to kind of wing it. But the Council of Michigan Foundations actually has a standardized grant application that you could get if you get to that situation, or you just copy from another grant that you're submitting and use that same format. They're all going to have the same sections, right, to describe your project and what you're trying to do, okay? You usually have to report back to them. Sometimes they only want a final report at the end of your project to see how you spent the money and to see if you had any left over that you're going to return to them, which you rarely see happen. Sometimes they want to hear quarterly, all right? But most that I've seen just want to hear, at the end of the year, okay, or at the end of the project, okay? You have to have somebody who's going to spend some time doing research. You want to explore connections. It's really cool to look if Kresge came up as a hot one, or Kellogg Foundation, or some fund through the community, community foundation. You want to see, who's on their board? Do we have connections? Maybe an executive at my company is on their board or something, and I've met that person. I want to. You can go talk to board members and say, hey, I'm submitting a grant to this foundation. I see you're on the board for it. Can we talk about it, or can you give me any advice for putting the best face on this application? And then the work is in developing your proposal to submit for the grant. Okay, so you need people who are good at writing, and you're gonna draw from your case, but then there's going to be other narratives you have to put in. Like usually, you don't just put in your budget. You put in your budget, but then there's a section called budget narrative, and that's just somebody writing about, okay, we're gonna spend we need about 15% of the money by February because we have these advanced costs. And then you see the rest of this, and the salary we put in there is for a project manager, blah, that we got to hire, and blah blah blah. You know, so you need somebody who can write clearly and convincingly, right? So considerations. When you do an application, you can reuse those, right? Well, the budget is the same for all of them. Usually, you might tweak it a little bit because they want it in a different format. But your project description is going to be very similar. So these are reusable, recyclable. So we like recycling, right? Sometimes you have to wait a while for review. Some foundations are only going to have one granting cycle a year, and it's hard. You know, most of them don't have more than 2 or 3 granting cycles a year. So you've got to try to find somebody that's got something coming up in a time frame where you've got enough time to put a good proposal together, but it's not so far out that you're not going to have the money and time. Okay? You want to explore your connections either with staff of the foundation or with trustees. The reason I put this in there is a lot of times you'll want to reach out and call or email a program officer and tell them about your project to make sure that there's a fit. There's nothing that it's the best thing. Some places say we don't want you to call, just submit your application. But if they say call a program officer, do it because they can save you time. They could say, no, you know what, we're skipping that kind of project this year, and we're only funding arts this year. Well, that just saved you a lot of time in preparing a proposal for them, right? And you can spend your time on something else. So you really want to reach out to them to make sure, yes, we encourage you to submit. And by the way, we're finding a lot of people aren't using our budget form that's on our website, and we throw them away. If they tell you that your headings have to be in 14-point Times New Roman, you have to do that. Some of them will throw them away if you don't have the right margins, okay? So I've seen people talk about it. So it's good to call them and make sure you understand what their requirements are. And they're almost always on their website, okay? So the money here can be pretty good. The return here doing grants can be pretty good. There's quite a bit of effort. The cost can be very low. It's mostly time. If you wanted to hire a grant writer, these are people who are usually really good at writing specifically for, you know, funding from foundations. You can spend a little bit of money, but get a really good product back. But if you have somebody that's good at writing and you follow some basic steps, there's grant writing for dummies. You know, there's some decent books out there that can kind of walk you through what to pay attention to. I have an ebook on writing an effective grant. So, you don't need to hire somebody, but it's good to know that you can if you really strap for resources. I don't know how many people you have who can spend the time doing that.
Right.
And so you may decide, let's spend $250 and have somebody pump out 2 proposals for us, or whatever it costs.
Yeah, what's a typical cost?
I don't know. It's going to be an hourly cost because the proposals typically are, you know, some of them are much more involved than others. So I would think most of them are going to charge by the hour, rather than saying, oh, I'll do a proposal for $500. So I don't know, but I could always help find people who come recommended in the nonprofit world. Okay, any questions about grants? Let me talk now about sponsorship. And now I'm not going to talk about